And we welcome into the program right now, here live in studio. We always appreciate that. He is Jeff Wright, and he is one of the candidates for State Superintendent of Public Schools in the state of Wisconsin. Jeff, thank you so much for making the trip in,
Of
and
course.
welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on.
A pleasure. We're going to start. I'll start out with something just that has nothing to do with school boards or school issues, really. But Bob Uecker, I mean, just I think all of us, whether we're into sports or not into sports, what was your memory or thoughts on the passing of the late great Bob Uecker?
Well, certainly our radios will sound a little different this summer in the state of Wisconsin. And I remember taking my now 6th and 8th grade kids, but when they were much younger, up to go find his seat.
Really? Yeah.
Way up at the top of at the time Miller Park, and his obstructed view, and trying to explain to my little kids why this man matters so much, and certainly a loss to our state today.
Well, that's a cool story, and yeah, for those that have kids like yourself to help them remember and be part of really Wisconsin history is a cool thing. So our radios will sound differently this summer, but it's going to be great having those memories of Euchre all these years. I appreciate you taking some quality time with us, and we go all across the state. And I think there are a lot of people who are like, first of all, wait a minute, there's an election in April because everybody's electioned out. But yes, there actually is an election, and an important one for state school superintendent. You are one of 3 candidates vying for the position. For those that might not have heard of you before, tell folks a little bit about yourself.
Well, there's actually a primary on February 18th. So if people wanted an election even sooner, we've got one in just about a month. Well, as you said, I'm Jeff Wright. I'm currently the superintendent in the Sauk Prairie School District, just northwest of Madison. I grew up in Stevens Point. My parents were both teachers there, and I have family throughout the state. Between growing up in Stevens Point and where I'm now a superintendent, for a while I was a teacher, and I also was a principal on the south side of Chicago at one of the Chicago Public School high schools for about 9 years there. I'd love to share a story or two about my time as an educator.
Absolutely. I was going to say, because I think, to me, and having worked in the state capitol, particularly for the state senate for a lot of time, the state school superintendent office and DPI, Department of Public Instruction, it's one of the less politically sexy offices. You don't hear a lot about it. People are, you don't have a lot of news about it. So I think a lot of people don't understand how important it is. And I'm interested in what led you to have a passion for public education. I come from a family of educators, but what led you to be concerned about education and why you want to run for this job?
Yeah, it certainly isn't an office that gets a ton of attention, but certainly our schools do. And I think that we all want many of the same things for our schools and for the kids in our communities. And so one of the opportunities with this sort of role is that it's a nonpartisan position. And I like to consider myself a nonpartisan problem solver. I'm currently doing the job as superintendent in the most purple county in Wisconsin, if not the entire country. Sauk County voted for Obama twice, and then Trump, then Biden, then Trump. You can't find a lot of counties like that.
No.
But what an unusual and unique place to be a school leader, and having to be so deliberate to make sure that everybody feels welcome in the schools, but also welcome at the table to talk about public education. And I think that that's what's motivating me to do this job. I think that the role of state superintendent in an equally purple state, it's an opportunity to bring people together to do the right thing for kids. And that's what I've been trying to do, both when I was a classroom teacher, when I was a principal, and now as a superintendent, is what can we solve for kids? What community problems can we address differently by bringing schools to the table? I'd love to talk about some of the things that we've solved in Sauk Prairie as a result of bringing people to the table. I mean, recently we've broken ground on a new childcare center that's going to be owned by the village of Prairie to Sac, but operated by the school district. And it was a project led by our Chamber of Commerce that desperately was looking for ways to get more childcare seats in the room or in the area.
Wow.
We're reimagining the way that we support children with mental health needs or families in crisis by deliberately working more in collaboration with county social services, the medical community, juvenile justice, and that work was honored with a $5 million grant from the U.S. Department of Education, a really large grant for a district our size. We've added solar panels to the top of the high school roof. And I bring those examples of childcare and mental health and solar panels up because each of those projects was unanimously supported by my school board. But I know that individually they have different yard signs in front of their homes. And it's because we worked through these problems together. We found solutions that we could all support, brought those forward, unanimously voted on them, and are making progress in our community as a result.
I love this because you hit on a couple of things. One of the most beneficial things that we have done here at this show over the last year plus is we take these week-long tours. We call them What Makes Wisconsin Great. And we make them really not all that partisan political, but we talk to business people, we talk to educators, we've talked to veterans, just people in our communities that we can mostly all of us agree that those are the things that make us great. And two of the things you just mentioned, number one, childcare, and number two, mental health, have been things that people have been interacting with us. And I think it's a novel and an awesome way that you can work with local businesses to help tell folks a little bit more about how you did that in your school district in Sauk County to bring childcare.
Well, it really, we originally were starting looking at housing and how could we bring more housing to the community. And what we found out from local employees and employers is that childcare was becoming an even bigger problem. And that people had to drive out of the community to drop their children off at childcare in order to return to the community to work and then make that same trip after work. So we started looking for solutions. We started working with the existing childcare providers in our community to see if they could expand their operations. That wasn't a possibility. We got a small state planning grant to try to look for another creative solution. And in the end, we just decided that how could we find a facility somewhere in the community where we could put a child care center that the school district could operate so that we could benefit from reducing costs by the purchasing power of the school district. And originally we looked at a church. We thought that a Sunday school wing would be an ideal place to put this because it was relatively unused during the school day. And hopefully a solution that could be replicated across the state. Unfortunately, we couldn't find a church that would fit the code compliance regulations to serve newborns. You have to have an immediate access point so that you can get them out in an emergency or a fire. And in the end, we turned to our business community and said, what if we built a small new structure in land already owned by the village in a park? So then the kids are already in a park. And the village said yes. 45 or so businesses contributed to the project, Culver certainly being one of them, being in Sauk Prairie.
Right.
And what I'm proud of is that as a result, we're reducing the cost to operate for rent and mortgage because it's already owned by the public, the building. Yeah. And we're able to put some of those resources then in paying childcare workers a living wage, which often childcare workers are some of the lowest paid people in a community and rarely have access to benefits. And so honoring them as important parts of our community's workforce, because they're going to hopefully set these students up, these young children, to be more successful in school when it's our turn to educate them in a traditional school.
That story to me epitomizes what I've heard as we travel around the state, what a lot of Wisconsinites are looking for, leaders to just get something done. Quit fighting each other, quit arguing with each other, and just get something done. And I think that story, business, community, educators coming together to get something done and real solutions. I think that sells, as they say, across the state of Wisconsin.
And how exciting to be able to do that as a partner with communities across the state in a role of state superintendent. We know that when our schools thrive, our communities thrive. And if I can help direct change to make sure that we have really modern schools that are serving students differently, hopefully we can then get things done, as you said, in communities across the entire state and continue to make Wisconsin a great place to raise a family.
Let's talk the other point you brought up, mental health. Again, something that when we've talked about this subject on this program, our phones light up, the text lines light up. I think it's one of the most underappreciated or talked about issues that our entire state faces. I don't care whether it's our ag producers, who the rate of death by suicide has skyrocketed from the pressures on our ag producers, whether it's kids. You know, we just, as you well know, had a tragic shooting here in Madison 3 weeks ago at Abundant Life Christian School, and mental health issues come up there. As a superintendent, someone in education, what have you done, and what are your feelings moving forward for the state? How can we make mental health a broader, more talked about issue to find solutions?
Well, let me talk specifically about the problem we were trying to solve in Sauk Prairie and the tools we're using to try to solve that. We know that families who have children who are experiencing mental health issues are really struggling to get care, and that there can be 6-month, 9-month, year-long waits to get access to mental health care. And those can be even longer depending on the type of insurance you have. We also know that the county social service agencies and the healthcare in communities, law enforcement, they don't always communicate effectively with each other, and they potentially are trying to support the same kid or support the same family. And so the model that we've created is to try to make the school the hub for service delivery. We're not providing all the services, but we're making sure that we're coordinating the services so that we're not either replicating services, which is a waste of resources, or assuming that somebody else is taking care of a family that actually is not receiving any care. And what we've heard from our county social services, and we get the privilege of serving 3 different counties with how large our district is geographically, is that every school district needs some sort of resource like this. But that's going to require an investment from the state and a willing partner in the counties. I'm grateful that ours have been a willing partner to make sure that we are comfortable being at the same table with each other and not being threatened by somebody asking questions about the care that you're providing somebody. We're also working with our students to make sure that they are better prepared to help each other out in times of need. There's a line in education, like the adults are often second or third to know. It's kids who know first. They know when their friends are struggling. Did they have the resources and the tools to help each other out when something's not going right? And one of the programs that we're using from 6th through 12th grade is called Sources of Strength. And the idea behind this program is that we all have strengths. We have to know how to draw on them at different times. It could be our spirituality. It could be physical wellness. It could be generosity. It could be a trusted adult or a positive friend. But sometimes I just need to have that language to say that I need a trusted adult right now. Or to be able to say to a friend, like, Todd, I think what you really need right now is to talk to a trusted adult. Who is that person in your life? And empowering students to be able to help each other in a positive way. They do have the assets to get through these hard times, but sometimes they can't see them in the middle of that storm.
Yeah. Like I said, I come from a whole family of educators. My mom and dad and stepmom are all retired teachers. My grandmother was a educator, all from a one-room school all the way through a university. And my sister and brother-in-law still teach at the Eau Claire School District in high school and middle school. And I've heard from them echoes of what you just said, that the kids know, but it's having time because teachers are so overwhelmed with, and I think a lot of people don't understand this. I'll call it paperwork to put it in layman's terms, but the amount of time they spend in meetings, having to write reports, it takes away from actually educating kids.
It does. I mean, that's certainly the job of a teacher continues to get harder all the time. And, but they're also, it's such an energizing profession too. And especially if you're allowed to practice your craft and allow your own personality and your art to show. I think that if you reach out to any of those teachers in your family, or I did the same with the teachers in mine, that the stories that come out of the life-changing work that we get to do, it is motivating even in the most exhausting days filled with a meeting or two that you didn't want to attend or paperwork you didn't want to have to do.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. We got about a minute left here before the first break. We're talking with Jeff Wright, a candidate for Department of Public Instruction, Superintendent of Public Schools here in Wisconsin. And again, thank you for the reminder. The primary, there are 3 candidates, so there is a primary on February 18th, a month. I can't believe it.
Yeah, here we go.
I mean, it's just, I want to come back. I know you have a little bit of news to break on this show, a major endorsement, so I want to talk about that. And also your other top 1 or 2 issues in your campaign, what you think traveling around the state of Wisconsin, what you're hearing from people about the situation in our public schools across Wisconsin. Jeff Wright is our guest. Civic Media is our network. I'm Todd Allball, your host. We'll be back after this on the Civic Media Radio Network. Welcome back to the Todd Ball Show on the Civic Media Radio Network. It is 9 before the hour of 2 o'clock. At the top of the hour, news, weather, and sports, followed by the Maggie Dawn Show every afternoon, 2 to 4. Maggie Dawn, followed by Dom Salvia, and then Pete Schwaba and Nightlight. Right now, we have the pleasure here in studio, our guest, one of the candidates for Department of Public Instruction of Public Schools here in Wisconsin in the February 18th primary. That's right, February 18th. Make sure you get to the polls. Jeff Wright. Jeff, we really appreciate you coming in. You have a major endorsement to announce today.
Well, I do. Last week, at the end of the week, I was honored to receive the endorsement of the Association of Wisconsin School Administrators. So that's the people who are leading our schools in our communities are endorsing me to lead the state schools. And then today I get to announce that former Senator Dale Schultz has added his name to the list of endorsements. And I'm grateful for Dale's support. Dale and we live close to each other, and he's had a chance to watch me work, and I appreciate his words of support.
Well, it is big news, and people, regular listeners of this show, and in full disclosure, I worked for Dale. I had nothing to do with hooking up this endorsement, but I am thankful that you chose to come on our show and talk about it. It's Bob Schieffer, a former longtime anchor at CBS, said, "I think you just made a little bit of news." Dale is a revered person in the state of Wisconsin, and again, I don't say that just because I worked for him. I know it because I traveled with him. Longtime Republican. Also just endorsed Kamala Harris for president, has endorsed Tony Evers for governor in his first run, but is also a longtime Republican. I think, that's the kind of person that a lot of people look up to on both sides of the aisle. And now Dale Schultz coming out today and endorsing you. He says, in part in his endorsement declaration here, he says, quote, "In last November's election, Wisconsin voters divided our choices at the top of the ticket. But we all came together on an issue just as vital to our families and communities. Across Wisconsin, voters stood up for public education by passing an historic number of school referenda," unquote, from Dale Schultz. I think that is so well said because, as you started at the top of the show, I mean, you from Sauk County, a swing county, but you've been able to reach out and get things done. I think that's representative of what you're running here for state school superintendent.
Oh, and Dale Schultz later on in his endorsement talks specifically about that sort of work of watching me bring people together to get that work done for our communities and keeping people really invested in our schools. And I like to share a story of kind of what inspired that in me over time. When I was first a teacher, it was in Rochester, Minnesota, which is the home of the Mayo Clinic. And at the time, I was teaching an international politics class, and we were studying conflicts in the Middle East. Some of these storylines don't change, unfortunately, even 20 years later. And at the time, the King of Jordan, King Hussein, was being treated for what ended up ending his life, but some health issues at the Mayo Clinic. And I was talking about the different characters in the Middle East and the different maps, and so that the students could understand what was in the news. And I, in jest, said, "Can you believe that King Hussein is right there?" And I pointed to the hospital that we could see outside of my classroom window. And he hasn't yet been to our world affairs class. And this student in the back of the room named Crystal, I'll never forget her. She raised her hand and in a snotty voice said, "Well, have you even invited him?" and at the moment, I kind of laughed at it. And then I thought, she's right. I invite him to the table, invite him in and see what you find out. And it took us a while to get to his chief of protocol. But in the end, not long before he died, he agreed to fax question and answers back and forth to our high school students. And it may have been some of the last interviews that he did.
Wow.
But the lesson that I took from that is heeding Crystal's advice all the time. Like, have you invited that person into the conversation? Have you invited them into the classroom? And over again, I found as an educator and as a principal and as a superintendent, when you invite people to come in and participate in the public schools, whether it's expanding apprenticeships and workplace opportunities, whether it's coming in and reading to kids, any of those opportunities, if you invite people in, they're going to find a way to connect to schools. And I think that that's what Dale is highlighting in his endorsement, is that attitude, that perspective that everyone should have a voice in our public schools, but we need to have leadership that brings those people in.
Again, I think that exemplifies what I hear from Wisconsinites. They want someone who's going to reach out and have a dialogue, even sometimes with people that we don't agree with. Just a couple of minutes left here. One of those issues, of course, is funding, property taxes. I've left you all of 90 seconds, but just your quick thoughts on how you work with both sides of the aisle of the legislature if you were to become DPI secretary or superintendent.
Well, this is one area that right now it's not working. It is a broken relationship. The current state superintendent was the only agency head not invited to testify at the last Joint Finance Committee process for creating the last biennial budget. And it's unfortunate that that relationship is broken, and I hope that I can restore a conversation and a relationship with both sides of the aisle so that we can address some of these longstanding questions and issues in education, whether they be funding or other things that are helping our communities make sure that we're serving our kids correctly.
Yeah, and I think what Dale says in his endorsement, again, former Senate Majority Leader, Republican Dale Schultz, endorsing Jeff Wright for DPI superintendent today, that even in counties that went for Donald Trump in November, overwhelmingly school referenda passed. People care about their public schools because they are our communities.
And we know that they attract families and that employers who need workers need people who want to move into a community. And often one of the first things people check out is the quality of the schools and what support they think that their children are going to receive by making that school their life choice.
I was a little off my clock there, but about a minute left here. But is there anything that we haven't talked about or I haven't asked you? I want to make sure you get people to hear from you in the last minute.
Well, first, thanks for having me on. Thanks for letting me share my news about Senator Schultz. I'll make sure to run up to his farm and grab another handshake sometime soon. Just personally, my wife was also a teacher. She now works in outdoor education primarily, and we are raising a 6th grader and an 8th grader and a whole bunch of chickens on a small farm not too far out of Spring Green.
And it's Jeff Wright for Wisconsin.com, correct?
That is correct.
Jeff Wright. It's spelled WRIGHT, Jeff Wright for Wisconsin.com. Our computers are crashing around us, but Zommers is still on top of it. Jeff Wright, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We appreciate your time. Congratulations on the endorsement from Dale Schultz. Stay tuned. Maggie Dawn is next. Whatever you're fighting for, whatever you believe in, do not give up. Keep banging your drum. We'll have Maggie Dawn, hopefully, if the computers work next hour. We'll see you on Monday as Matt Rothschild's in for us tomorrow. Have a great day, everybody. It's the Town Hall Ball Show on Civic Media's Radio Network.